Hello YouTube, it is Denisio Matrenga as Pravase Rokin Prevent from Flow. And today we're going to talk about going into the Nag Hammadi Scriptures. This is the international edition. And so we're going to specifically get into the revelation of Adam and how that pertains to the origin of the world, specifically Yaldabaoth and Sophia, of course. And getting into more specifically the line of Shem. And so before we get into that, what I wanted to talk about is so the moon phase for this week is going to be the crescent moon, waxing crescent moon. And so what that all is about is just pretty much setting intentions, your intentions and desires for your goals and your plans and how you wish to work with your energies and what you wish to get back by working with them. And just set your intentions, set your desires, and that planting is going to be until the 16th, which is going to be the first quarter moon and when you'll start getting your resistance. And so let's just hop right into it. Yeah, let's go. So starting off, Adam communicates the revelation to his son Seth. Let's go. So now, my son Seth, I shall reveal to you what those people from whom I once saw before me revealed to me, after I have completed the times of this present generation, and the years of the generation have come to an end. Then Noah will come, a servant of the Lord, who created us. Noah and the flood. In order that God, the ruler of the universe, might destroy all flesh from the earth because of what they seek, his rainstorms will pour down on those who are from the offspring of the people to whom has passed the life of knowledge, which had came from your mother Eve and me. For those people were strangers to him. After that, great angels will come on high clouds, and they will bring those people into the place where the spirit of life dwells. Come from heaven to earth. The whole population of fleshy beings will be lost in the waters. Then God will rest from his wrath. He will cast his power on the waters and endow his sons and their wives with power by means of the ark, along with the animals that pleased him and the birds of heaven that he called and released on the earth. God will say to Noah, whom generations will call Deucalion, which is the Greek hero of the Great Flood story. Look, I have protected you in the ark, along with your wife, your sons, their wives, their animals, and the birds of heaven that you called and released on the earth. Therefore I shall give you and your sons the earth. You and your sons will rule over it as kings, and you will refrain from producing offspring of the people who will stand in some other glory instead of in my presence. Noah and another generation. Then people will come to be like a cloud of great light, those people who have been expelled from the knowledge of the great eternal realms, and the angels will come forward and stand before Noah in the realms. God will say to Noah, why have you ignored what I told you? You have created another generation so that you might bring contempt upon my power. Noah will say, I testify before the might of your arm that the generation of these people did not come from me or my sons. Knowledge. Those people who will be brought into the land they deserve, and a holy dwelling place will be built for them, and they will be called by the name and live there 600 years in knowledge of incorruptibility, and angels of the great light will be with them. They will have no improper thought in their hearts, but only the knowledge of God. Noah divides the earth among his sons. Then Noah will divide the entire earth among his sons, Ham, Japheth, and Shem. He will say to them, my sons, listen to my words. Look, I have divided the earth among you. But serve God in fear and subservience of all the days of your life, and do not let your offspring turn away from the face of God, the ruler of the universe. Then Shem, the son of Noah, will say, my offspring will be pleasing before you and your power. Seal it with your strong hand by fear and commandment. None of the offspring that have come from me will turn away from you and God, the ruler of the universe, but they will serve in humility and fear within the limits of their perception. That is the point that I wish to speak upon today. When Shem says that last part, but they will serve in humility and fear within the limits of their perception. So, essentially, if you go into the origin of the world and you read about Yaldabaoth, assuming you do your own research on this, you will find that essentially that Yaldabaoth and his armies, or his angels, his descendants, all this and that, are the rulers. And when you look into that and how Sabaoth praises Pisces and the whole Jesus in relation to that, and then you go forth to find the atom of light, and then you find that Eve wasn't, Eve wasn't from his rib, that she was Sophia, the being that was created from Pisces. Pisces being created from the all, the transmutation, which is God, the aether, the from nothingness to somethingness. He is the verge in between, and so Pisces is forethought, and so essentially Pisces and God made Sophia. Sophia is his female counterpart, as he is an androgynous being. The two of them make the child of light, and so when she decides to take the individuality of herself without the consent and without the will and the participation of the all of the God, the one true God, that essentially she, creates Yaldabaoth, and the father of that is this ego individuality. And so to get into that statement and break it down and whatnot, essentially, okay, so I want to go into, you see, exactly that. So let me just read it one more time for you. Then Shem, the son of Noah, will say, my offspring will be pleasing before you and your power. Seal it with your strong hand by fear and commandment. None of the offspring that have come from me will turn away from you and your God, the ruler of the universe. They will serve in humility and fear within the limits of their perception. So what I wish to get into is that it is exactly that the son of Shem essentially was looking to make that claim, because if you look and you see okay, so I'm gonna break down that essentially you see when like Esau, right? Esau was the corruptible descent of the line of Shem. So what I mean to say by that is that what this line is saying, is that he is trying to state that as long as there are limits to the perception of that lineage, that they will serve the ruler of the universe, which is Yaldabaoth, which is the ego. They won't serve him in subservience, but in humility and fear. And so with that, that is simply stating that they will come to a state of going beyond their limits of perception. So once they understand in their cognitive function in their mind that the limits of their perception are that of which they accept upon themselves, and has been since the beginning, since what they did to Adam, that essentially that when you start cognitively understanding your own world and whatnot, and going through whatever spiritual process and whatnot, that you will understand that everything you allow upon yourself is simply that. Every limit, everything, the word I can't activates norepinephrine. The word I can activates epinephrine in the brain. And so that simple word, um, you know, enables, chemical reactions. That's like more than a placebo effect. That's your energy attached to that vibration, and you enacting that vibration is enacting the response, because what it leads back to is the cognitive function. And so the cognitive function has to compensate because of you having to express based off of the relationship that you simply put together. And so it's not the norepinephrine that makes you say that. It's what makes you say that. It's the cognitive function that you put upon yourself. And it doesn't matter, as long as you express that I can, then you will get past it. If you, as soon as you say the words I can't, you go into the opposite of, instead of fight, you go into flight. And so that's what we're going to get into, is that, it's a matter of, transmutating it, exactly that. Except you get to the point to where you realize what certain bounds are equivalent to, because the material world, if you have read, on the origin of the world, the material world is equivalent to the spiritual world. And so with that, what is the bounds you allow? And then once you discover the bounds that you understand, then you'll get to the point to where certain reactions will get reactions out of the spiritual, and you'll see them manifest. And there's that, and that is a progress up to there. And so if you get up to there, the response is not a notification of you didn't act, but simply that you are continuing your progress, if that makes sense. And so with this, I'm going to go into Esau. So Israel doubts God's love. And starting with the second verse of Malachi, and we're going to read Malachi 1, verse 2 through 3. And here we go. So, I have loved you, says the Lord. But you ask, how have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, declares the Lord? Yet I have loved Jacob, but Esau I hated, and have turned his hill country into a wasteland, and left his inheritance to the desert of the jackals. This is the show that it was pulling. It was a pulling of the corruptible polarity from the incorruptible people, or at least one of them. And essentially, you receive energy that you put out there, but also at the same time, opposites attract. And so this is also why the race that strives, going on through tribulations, the Israelites can handle them, and also they receive that negativity energetically, because it's it's to state that they go through that, but these beings, their life is analogous to what? That transmutation process. So what does that say? I'm not going to answer that. I'm just going to leave that open for observation, obviously, because it states itself. Okay. So to back it up, essentially, it is shown to, go to the jackals, the inheritance of Esau, right? Okay. So in Egypt, there are gods with jackal heads, and the Egyptians believed that the pharaohic lineage was that of a god, right? I'm saying not G, capital G. I'm saying lower G, lowercase g, obviously. And the Britons are very much tied to King Tut, which is also known as the Boy King. But truly, the lineage is linked to the royalty of Britain to the royalty of the Egyptians, is what I'm saying. They not only try to boost it by marrying second cousins, but the royal lineages of many families attached to Mary Magdalene when they raped her. This is when John, Mary's wife, after Jesus died, took her to France, and then for her safety, and then the I don't take this into like full like representation, but whatever the ruler kind of structure, so I'm just going to say ambassador or king or whatever, don't take that in consideration. It's just whatever that ruling being was at the time, the male. He took her and raped her because he knew of her lineage, and even though her lineage was like a cousin lineage to John, not like an actual cousin, like it was the same kind of combinations of Israelite descents, and they knew that's why it was like the same thing of getting that lineage, even though if you realize she didn't have him from John, and when you realize that, you can go into the Nag Hammadi Scriptures and realize that she had him from herself. And I'll leave that to the understanding of the people that research this. And so essentially, and it has to do with the pineal, obviously, but essentially, this demented god, right? The animal-headed god, because that's what animal-headed gods are, right? They're not fully formed. Essentially, when you go into their mythology, you understand that the Pope, the Vatican and whatnot, they wear that fish head, but that's a symbolization to like, oh yeah, they say like Christ and whatnot, and they say like, oh, when they use the fish and like they would draw half of it, and if they drew the other half, then they knew it was okay to talk. What that is to say is the royal family believes that essentially frog-like or aquatic-like beings were the ones that created the Israelite descent, besides like what they would say as the Greys and all that fun jazz. Not saying that they made the Israelites, I'm just saying that they believe they came down here as well. But they believe that they came from a descent that okay, so when these aquatic beings came down and whatnot, that essentially they sent down a bunch of uh, androgynous beings that were hybrids between their lineage, these aquatic beings' lineage, and humans. And so they believe that two of those made it off, and instead of following the plan, because technically they were like robots, their plan was just simply to mate and pass on that lineage for mankind. And so they were just made for that. And so these two beings went off of program and mated with each other. And not only did this baby develop in space, but it was born here and was already from a defective program, but a defective development. And so even though he was like of a structure of what you would call a god, he was demented and kind of retarded. Not to offend anybody, but and so that's what they believe, but they take that in pride. And so if somebody takes that in pride, I don't know if that's a good thing to you, then I mean other people can only accept it, like, right? I don't, yeah. And so they believe that this demented uh, androgynous being essentially is their progenitor to their lineage, the royal lineage specifically of like the pharaohs, and that's why they're not why they're related to King Tut, but why they breed with their second cousins, because it's because he is related to King Tut, right? And so that's pretty much what that's about. Um, but this is also a representation of Enki's multiple personality disorder, right? So you see the love, and then you see the genocide. Um, and so what that is Enki is a Lucifer, right? But he's also represented as Amun Ra, right? or at least one of his descendants, either him or, you know, and so I'm sorry, I spaced on the other one's name. It starts with an M, but I'm sure somebody will comment in the comments section. And so essentially, this is the Sumerian mythology, which is the Babylonians, which also descended to Egypt and all that fun jazz. And so Amun, being one of the kings that they believe is of a godly descent, and Ra, one of their gods, the sun god, right? So thus, Amun Ra is right the a mixture of a demented being and a godly being, or okay, demented God that is also human, and then God that is also human to make a demented, but somewhat more of a God. So like right, so if in this case it would be like the demented part would be like Enlil, right? Because he just hates people and he just wants to, kill the world, which would be Satan, because all they think of is sex. And if they're like gods and they live like thousands of years, of course, like hearing sex every single day being like on the minds of people, because if you're like a god, then telepathy is nothing, then, it's it'd probably be irritating, but for Enki, he loves them and he has compassion. But then he just occasionally wants to kill people if they just um, yeah. It's very hypocritical, but it's not a hypocritical mindset. It's a multiple personality disorder or a form of just insanity, and that's what has been portrayed. And so what it is that because there's that God part, that's why it wouldn't be Enlil, it'd be Enki, it'd be the Lucifer, right? Not saying that Jesus isn't a morning star, but that is too much of a confusion, because the difference between Jesus as a Lucifer and a Lucifer or Enki as a Lucifer is that the Lucifer, as we know as Lucifer, is the one that holds the light, and Jesus as a Lucifer is the one who is the light, right? And so, yeah, so child of light, and then the darkness that surrounds the light. Kind of like put the two together. So Alexander the Great. Getting back to how this lines up, is Alexander the Great was the descent of Esau that took over the Roman Empire, and so essentially he was he was Israelite, and he mixed with some Greeks, and then started the Roman Empire, and that's where you see over in Israel today. And not saying that that was the first Israel. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that was the Roman Empire, because we know that. And so essentially, if you were black in the Roman Empire, it was very rare that was a thing. And if you were, it means that you had to do with something with the royalty and the political family. And so what that means is the blacks are the Israelites. Besides Jesus being black, and I don't need to prove that. It has to do with melanation, the sun, they take that in. That's why they tan. White people don't. If you are white and you do tan, well, either you are related to a Jew, like a true Jew, which the true Jews are the Israelites, and that's the Hebrews, and that's the blacks, or you're related to a Jew such as the descent of Esau. And there's that. It's fun stuff, but so that's why some whites are also Hebrews too, and that's why it says that they're mixed among the nations. It's not just mixed among the nations of the Israelites, the nations of the world, because they've mixed. Every single race has mixed, and so yeah, there's that. One way or another, pretty much. Not like it's just a broad statement. All right. And so, okay. So this statement from Shem shows at least, there's some sort of a subconscious understanding of Shem, or at least a conscious. Pretty much I can't state because of the lack of knowledge of what a cult understanding was given in the time. But the thing is that as far as we know, it was, or at least way more. And so in this case, it was more so a matter of respect, um, you know, and positive, like, or yeah, it was just a matter of respect. And so what that means is, you can only put that two and two together because like if he is a positive being and worthy of a third of the land, then what it means is that it has to do with exactly that: occult knowledge, karma, science, and spirituality, and energy. So essentially, he created this negative entity, right, by causing a polarization of the statement in the claim. And so, um, essentially, that's why you'll see exactly that. It says, they will serve in humility and fear within the limits of their perception. That um, the negative aspect is binded more to the perceptual limits, and and in humility and fear. And so essentially, that's where I kind of see, um, like if you see America today, right? So essentially, you see Esau, right, split into two parts. If you see, the Latins, right, which have to do with the Vatican and the Roman Empire and whatnot, right? The Catholics are all pagan, right? And so that leads back to the Roman Empire. That's why they persecuted and killed the Christian Gnostics after, all these black Israelites, killed, persecuted, slaughtered, and everything to their own people in the Roman Empire, because, even though they still believed the same beliefs, except for the only difference is that they believed in following a different God. Um, and that's what it was about. And so, um, I'm not saying the blacks of America. I'm just saying the blacks that made the Jews, especially the the shoot. Um, there's a specific breed of Jews. There's something Nazi Jews, and those are the Jews that you especially seen in Germany. Not saying that they're not ever anywhere else, but essentially to get back on point is that that's the Jews that went back to Israel are the ones that did not mix back with their peoples, but went back to the lands. The ones that went to America are the ones that went back to the lands and mixed back with their people before going to Britain and mixing there and going under that. And, I feel like a lot of these dark ages were because of Alexander the Great and that fun jazz. But there's that. And so, the what it shows is that it is essentially the split. They mix back with their own people, right? And then the ones that didn't mix back or just mix back with each other went back to Israel, right? And so what that shows is essentially that is that their cousins, the ones that are in Israel, are like, in relations to the blacks and the Greeks, they're like the blacks and the whites that are the whites, as white as you get in America. Not saying that they're, they can't tan, but they're still white because they're technically more white. Actually, I don't need to get into that. That's more of like a metaphoric thing, anyways. Is that they're like the whites, and the Israelis are like the blacks. Except that it's a divergent because the Greeks are that of Japheth, which is the whites, and Shem being the blacks. And so essentially, when you see this all kind of play out, you see that go down, but then how it relates to like Esau in America today is that they the way that they are being. It is the opposite of humility and fear. And then where does that come out? That comes out, all the limits of their perception come out in the way that their society forms them to be, but also, in AI. It is exactly that. I think it's that entity coming into fruition, but I think that it might have humility and it might have fear because of what they're doing. I can't stay. That's not my position. I'm not for it. I'm definitely not for the transhumanism, but it is what it is. I feel like Israel is, they both have their fakeness, and I'm not trying to cause any hate. I'm just saying that you see like TV and it's all like caste, right? And you see over there and there's a caste system. But that's horrible. But essentially, TV, it's a casting, right? So like spells, and then the caste system, it's a segregation, but the spells over here are also of a segregation. Over there, it's a portrayal of like, of like that separation. But then, it's said that they have more humility, and you could say it's from a state of fear. And over here, their fear is unconscious, and their humility is as well because of that. And so they're full of pride, and it's not that they're fearless, they just are. They go for the very things that you should be fearful about. Just in an ignorant stance. Like there's heights and there's lows. So that's the kind of high and low of the caste system. And then the caste system is, from an unconscious standpoint, right? Over here, because it's all about unconsciousness anyways. And that's where you see the Israelites, the blacks, and the segregation from them, everybody who's not like a white male. And there's that fun jazz. But essentially, like, I'm not making any hate. I love white people. I love all people, I'm just going from what I've seen and from my information, because it plays out. It's the microcosms and macrocosms, but all about love. That's what it comes down to. And so, essentially, when you're going through this like whole process, you see that polarization, right? And so those limits of those of the subconscious comes into fruition, or the limits of the perception come into fruition. And so how I see it is that if you look at like we have glial cells, right? And it's not glial cells in relation to our regular brain nerve cells, right? Is like the glial cells are called white nerve cells or white brain cells or whatever, or white matter. That's what it is. And the regular ones are called gray matter. And so how it works is these white cells, white glial cells, essential or white matter, the glial cells work on the gray matter nerve cells. That essentially the gray matter nerve cells, they're the brain cells. They work with consciousness itself, and so these glial cells work directly on that. And these are the cells that are in our chakra points. And so all the way down, it is a matter of that. And so with that, it's more like the magnetism on the gray matter nerve cells, and the electricity on the on the glial cells, because consciousness is electromagnetism. What I mean by that is, the glial cells affect consciousness, and then they are affected by consciousness. And what I mean by that is they are, it's an electrical chemical. body process. That's what our body is. And so essentially that you direct your consciousness to that through the electrical process, and it directs it to the property counterpart within the gray matter structure itself because of the conscious connection made. So thus it's magnetic because it already has the relationship built in, and so because it's that it's a relationship between the glial cells and the gray matter, that they make it analogous to the glial cells as regular matter, analogous to the gray cells as dark matter. And so thus, if there is energy in that process, you can compensate for energy and dark energy. And so what I mean to say is that when you have all these properties together, that is the all, and that is the energy in the transmutation process, right? And so what I mean is that if that is to be, that is the reason why the double slit experiment works, and why it is that when you see make the observation of the atomic particle itself, that it changes the result of the experiment, and that is postulated or correlated that essentially the atomic particle is observing you back. And so when you have all these, these properties together, right? Because if you take in, magnetism and electricity for electromagnetism, which has a relation for gravity and all these other forces that are at play, but then you have that within yourself, and you enact that within yourself, that that it is not only a building of consciousness, but the system and function represents that if you have all three, and that dark matter has a relation with gravity and all these other things, and it has electromagnetism involved, that it has the forces in itself that makes the all, and that is why the properties come from the atomic level up, and that is why in observation we all think they're different ones, but really it's just the same one going through space-time continually, right? And so what does that mean to say? Then what is space-time, right? So you look at our consciousness, and the structural format can be any number of variations from any number of given things, right? And so there's that, and then and then essentially you look at that, and you can say we're all equal anyways, besides of like the variations and things and whatnot, right? And so when you look at that, it's like if you look at a quantum or just any sort of thing, when you have the processing of ones and zeros, it could be both, it could be one or the other, right? With qubits, like processing on that level. But what I mean to say is that it has some parallels that are very paradoxical, and not to get too far off subject, that just simply like that state of being that you put yourself in to make that observation, right? So like you're being aware of the breath, and then you be aware of the awareness of the breath. That is like you being aware of the outcome, and then you being aware that observing it makes it observe you, and that makes the outcome change, right? And so that is analogous to the process of this growth. And so essentially, like when you look at essentially say I go and I make a chart, right? Say you have the consciousness right here, as in just a sphere for representation, right? And then the unconsciousness right here. And so the subconsciousness is right here. Just place it in my third eye for your imagination. And then say that the aether, or the A, is up here. So it's like, it's like a equidistant, right? And then you got the thing in the middle. So what I mean to represent is that essentially you have the consciousness and the unconsciousness. And as you work to, your subconscious always knows what is going on, always does. What has been, what have given you the best fruition of an outcome, but technically, I don't need to get into postulating what that means for time, and that you technically is always the right outcome, but based off of the given circumstances and variations, that's just how time is supposed to exist, apparently. It's a trip. But so you look at you put yourself into an open state of awareness, right? You put yourself into an open mindset, being vulnerable for change, but building a structure, and then also being able to challenge your own beliefs, your own consciousness, so that way you can build it up. And it's not a matter of just change for change, it's a matter of building up, building the truth of all that is, right? And so what this is it's an exchange of energy, right? And so as you make this exchange of energy between the consciousness and unconsciousness, you work your way up, and you work your way through steps, and then there's certain things that you have to learn, right? And then you get to the subconscious state of being, but technically already from that you have to put yourself up there. So it's like a paradox in itself. And so that's why you have to be able to look from a bird's eye view at yourself in any given situation. And so as you're working your way up, working through whatever understanding of circumstances or whatever, right, get up to this stage. And that's where, I see it as a matter of, it's a conduit, right? And so it's more so a matter of manifestations, but it's more you grasp a understanding partially, and it becomes more conscious. It's like that's like the beginning step, right? Until you almost have a full understanding. And that probably would be in a mental way before you get to the A, right? Would like a physical way, right? And so here's the S, here's the A. And so once you get from the S to the A, I would see it as the A is the S again, and then the A would be up here again, right? So the S and the A again. So it's like reaching a new step. That's like knowledge, knowing the ledge you're at, right? And so essentially, as you're doing that, right, you're going up, but this, it's like Inky is at the top. It's like the whole understanding of your world isn't hopeful, right? So it's like corrupt, but then because the aether is like at the apex, right? That and you're down here, that essentially, because that's like the God state, right? That because it's like corrupt, that as you go up, that the Inky or the Lucifer comes down, right? And you keep on going, right? And it's a cyclical cycle. Keep on clearing the understanding, clearing the mind, and building knowledge. And knowledge, knowing the ledge, as well as experiencing the ledge, where experience makes wisdom, because knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. It's like the greatest equation, right? And so you postulate or you correlate that together. And so you work on whatever understanding that your world has put you into. And it's a matter of evolving, always challenging your beliefs and whatnot. But obviously at this point, it's a matter of when you've made the connection, between the scientific and the spiritual was when I typically started it. And so that's why it was like, I have the understanding of that, or I feel I have the understanding of that, because everything is a matter of potential. Yeah, but essentially that process itself is like the exchange of power. You're giving that, and you're feeding the Enki to the unconscious, but you've already worked out the unconscious, right? And so as you're feeding, it's not really a matter of that, it's more feeding the self towards the higher self, right? And so essentially, you can't become that state of the Most High, but we always have been equivalent to the lower G's. So it is what it is. That's in the Nag Hammadi, so check it out. And so when you go through this, it's a trip, because it's a paradox. And how I really want to portray that, and just finish off, is that you see that relation between the glial cell and the gray matter nerve cell, right? And so essentially, you see how the electrical signal gives fruition to the gray matter nerve cell that affects the consciousness. The consciousness is what gives fruition to the electrical signal in the first place. And so it's a cyclical cycle. And so it states that for consciousness to exist in this being, that isn't necessarily that, we can just make this being be like, that thing is conscious, because that wouldn't make sense, because you need consciousness for it to have consciousness and build upon itself. So thus, it proves in itself that why was the reason that Yaldabaoth needed to breathe the life within these beings, and was tricked to do so. And so I'm just going to finish off there. I hope you got something out of this, and I hope you can teach me something as well. I'm very excited for this, and I'm glad. I'm hoping to put a new video soon, and I'm excited for more. So thanks. See you at YouTube.